Let's get more now on events in the Commons. Labour MP Chris Bryant posted a picture online of the tense scenes. He is with us now. Hi, Mr Bryant, thanks for joining us. Tell us what happened.
So, as you know, in the House of Commons, we vote by walking through a division lobby. There's an aye lobby and a no lobby, and there's an entrance to each. At the main entrance to the no lobby, which is where government members of the Conservative Party, have been told by the Prime Minister, well, by the Deputy Chief Whip, that they had to vote through that door that you can just see in that photograph. And if they didn't, they would lose the whip. They would no longer be Conservative MPs and I guess therefore not be able to stand in the next general election, would lose their seats and so on. They'd been told that earlier in the day, but then 10 minutes before the vote, they were told, oh, no, that didn't apply anymore. It wasn't a confidence vote anymore. So all these people were gathering around, completely confused. Lots of Tory MPs very anxious. They wanted to vote against fracking, so with the Labour Party, because that's what the manifesto commitment was in the last general election. But they didn't want to lose the whip, so they were very confused. And you can see there's about 15 or 20 mostly Tory MPs surrounding a couple of Tory MPs who were waverers. There was a lot of shouting, there was a lot of gesticulating, pointing at people, jabbing at people, standing up to it, squaring up to people is how one other MP described it to me. And then in a moment that the only image I can summon up which sort of explains how it then felt was that you remember in the royal funeral when the Royal Naval Ratings were marching in lockstep together and just all moved forward without you ever being able to spot that anybody was pulling the gun carriage. Well, that's what it felt like. So that basically one, I think, or maybe two MPs, I couldn't see, I was 15 yards away, were effectively sort of frog marched through into the division lobby. Now, Kay, as you know, I've been around a very long time in Parliament and I'm not naive. Of course, it's perfectly legitimate for the whips to try and persuade their members by force of reason to vote with them. But it's not on to intimidate and bully. And in the last few years, we've really tried to change the culture in Parliament around bullying. And one of the key things is you're meant to recognise that the power you have as an MP or as a senior MP. And if lots of you are standing around one MP, that is bullying and intimidation. It wouldn't be countenanced in any other workplace, especially if you've got the Deputy Chief Executive, as it were, the Deputy Prime Minister and another very senior member who incidentally were giving completely different advice as to whether or not it was a confidence vote. That is bullying, and in any other workplace it wouldn't be allowed, and it should be called out in Parliament. I've heard Tory MPs say to me, oh, no, honestly, it was just a full and frank exchange of views. I'm sorry, that is code for bullying. And people in Parliament need to understand that that is bullying these days, and it needs to stop, because otherwise the behaviour that happens there in the chamber, which is sanctioned by people in this way, ends up being the behaviour that they adopt towards their staff, to other staff in the building, and that's the culture that we've got to change in Parliament. And I should just say, all of this is happening. It really heightened emotions because of one simple reason. We haven't really had a government for 9 months now. The Tory party has been rowing about who should be its leader. First of all, ousting Boris Johnson, I think quite rightly, but nonetheless ousting him, and then not going forward with the general election, but electing a new party leader who everybody knew would end up being pretty weak and in hock to different factions within the Conservative Party. And yesterday you just saw a complete and utter chaos. And in that moment of chaos, there will be individual Tory MPs who went to bed crying. I know because they've told me so.
Was there any manhandling that you saw?
So there's another photograph, which I didn't take, which shows somebody laying hands on another member. But as I say, the bit that for me is the manhandling. It's not picking somebody up and throwing them through the door. It's not aggressively pushing them, but it's certainly making sure that they went through in an intimidatory way, squaring up, and then the whole sort of team of them sort of moving through. So I would call that manhandling, but it's not. I'm not trying to suggest that it's somebody dragging somebody through. Other MPs who were there, I've spoken to, I think now, 5 different other MPs, both Conservative and Labour, who describe very similar things.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I'm pressing you on that, Mr. Bryant, is because if you put your hands on somebody else, and that's assault, and then that's something that the police should get involved with.
Well, yes. There's photographic evidence. Obviously, what happens in the chamber is, I think, now already going to be investigated by Mr. Speaker. But I make this bigger point. Even if there's no touching, it was profoundly intimidatory. It was meant to be intimidating. I'm the chair of the Committee on Standards. We've been trying to change the whole sort of culture in Parliament. And if at moments like these, when emotions are really high, we let ourselves down, I think we let the whole of Parliament down. And incidentally, I would just say that I represent one of the poorest constituencies in the country, in the Rhondda. Yesterday we had news that inflation is running at 10.1%, probably higher on food, maybe 15%. With lots of people are either on benefits, on universal credit, for instance, but in work. Lots of people on very depressed incomes because there's been a wage freeze for such a long time. That's what voters think we should be dealing with, not having, schoolboy rows in division lobbies. I mean, that's what, to me, I remember seeing scenes like that when I was at school. And it was horrible then. And it's the same kind of people doing it all over again.
Jacob Rees-Mogg has, apparently there are videos that Labour MPs have taken of events. He said, if there are, show them to him. Have you seen any?
I haven't seen any videos. I've only seen still photos, but Jacob Rees-Mogg is in all of them. But look, I mean, the real problem for the MPs was, right at the top of government, they hadn't made a decision as to whether it was a vote of confidence or not. So early in the day, they were told by the Deputy Chief Whip that it was. Then the government minister stands up in the chamber, which is normally the definitive moment, 10 minutes before the vote, and says this isn't a vote of confidence. And then 10 minutes later, they're being told all over again it is a motion of confidence. And that chaos, I mean, it goes right to the Prime Minister, to Downing Street.
Yeah.
We don't have a government. You might as well have. The lettuce might as well be running the country, or the tofu.
You took a photograph, which is against the rules.
It is.
How do you defend that?
You're quite right. It breaches House of Commons etiquette to take photographs. However, I think that in extraordinary moments, when you see what you consider to be bullying, and you know that everybody will lie about it afterwards, I think it's important sometimes to do that in the wider public interest. And I've told Mr. Speaker already that I did it, and he knows about it.
OK, well, I think it's in all the papers today, so even if you didn't, he'd know by now. It's good to talk to you, Chris Bryant. Thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.